just to let you know. Which is recording. Okay. Okay. So my name is Luke, and this is Dominic. Hello.
Hello.
Hi. We have one question. How do you say your last name? Is it Mr. Peel?
Correct.
Mr. Peel. Okay. Okay. So we have some just to warm up questions for you.
Yeah, and when you answer the questions, could you kind of restate the question? Like, if we were asking you where you were born, you would say I was born, and then you'd say the place.
Got it.
Okay.
So the first is question we have is, what's your name and where were you born?
Are we beginning the interview now?
Yeah. Or unless you want to.
Yeah, we'll start there. I wanted to know, well, first, what got you interested into your field of this, what made you interested to start writing about all this stuff?
Well, I haven't answered your first question yet.
Oh, okay. I decided just to skip that because we have your name.
I'll start right now, okay?
All right.
My name is Stanton Peel, and I was born in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, which is in the United States, for those of you who don't know Philadelphia.
Okay. Yeah.
All right, so now then, what got you interested in writing
I'm sorry, what'd you say?
What got you interested?
What is it that you think I'm interested in? Let me ask you that question first.
Since your field work is you write about game addiction, so we were wondering what got you into writing about game addiction.
I've always been interested in addiction really my whole life since I was a child in South Philadelphia. I've always been engrossed by people seeking unconsciousness and to lose themselves in activities. And of course, alcohol was one ready example where I grew up. Mm-hmm. And I, very early on, in 1975, which is not only before you two were born, but maybe before your parents were born, I wrote a book called Love and Addiction, which described how addiction doesn't come from a thing like alcohol or drugs. It's so obvious because so many people drink alcohol and they don't become alcoholics.
Right, yeah.
We take more powerful narcotics than heroin in the hospital, and we don't leave as addicts. So we need a much larger framework, something people might call multifactorial framework to understand addiction. And we also need to understand that addiction, since it doesn't come from the structure of one drug or alcohol, is possible with any kind of all-encompassing involvement. And it's the nature of the individual's relationship to that involvement that is addiction. Addiction isn't heroin, it's not alcohol, obviously it's not games. It's the kind of a relationship some individuals form to that involvement or activity. And then we need to expand our horizon and say, why did that happen? What is it about this person or their life space that created that addiction for them?
Mm-hmm. Okay. So we're also then the next question is, what do you think is kind of contributes to the addiction? Is it the brain? Is also feeling?
I'm sorry, say that one last time. What do I think?
About what do you think
really contributes to addiction? Is it more just someone just starts to is it just the brain just telling want more of it, or is it just they love it so they just?
Well, I don't think the explanation lies either in the brain or in love. I don't think people become alcoholics because they love alcohol. Do you think that they love alcohol and that's why they become alcoholics? Why do you think people become alcoholics?
It's because they can't help themselves of having more and more. It's just they can't help themselves.
Help themselves how?
like they can like stop, but they don't want to because like the feeling like it gives them like kind of like a rush of the feeling of like good, and they want it more and more.
That was very well put. I wouldn't say necessarily the rush because alcohol and heroin, for example, are both depressant drugs.
True. Yeah.
Rush is a funny word for it. It's more, if anything, a sedation process or sort of like being wrapped in wool so you don't have to face the outside world. But you're very insightful. The question is, what do they get from being intoxicated, engrossed in that experience, and how does that plug into their lives? So
Mm-hmm.
let me ask you, Dominic, can you take that model we just described and plug it into gaming? Does that model make sense in terms of gaming addiction?
Yeah, it kind of does. It
Tell me how. Expand how you see that.
because like gaming addiction is kind of similar where there's like they keep buying more and more even though like most of the games out there are just like the same thing. And so even though because people have figured it out because people I hear jokes all the time about oh it's just the same game but yet they just keep buying it. They just
And why do they do that?
because they well I think it's because they just it there's just something where they just want to buy it. I'm not exactly sure
You
though.
meet somebody, if you know somebody, and I guess you guys do know somebody, who spent all day indoors playing games, 8 hours or 10 hours or 12 hours,
Mm-hmm.
Right.
and they were failing at school or they didn't have any friends or they never went outside and played ball. How would you think about that person? What would you be looking for in terms of their motivation and how you might help them?
That's a good question. Well, I would say like they must have like some internal issues, maybe like they can't really get along with other people.
So like games is just like their way to kind of like escape like from reality, just kind of be in their own world.
You guys don't even need to interview me. You could interview each other. You've got it all. And if you were a therapist or if somebody, suppose it was a friend of yours and the parent of the friend said, well, look, we know you play games, but you're not completely crazed around it. Can you help my son, Mike, get out of that? What kinds of things do you think you might try to do to help him?
Well, maybe like um, take away like whatever let's say the game for instance, like take all the games away out.
And try to like tell them to go outside and play like just try to get them outside to like interact with more people.
Absolutely. And I mean, you wouldn't tell them. I mean, if you're a friend of theirs, you might say, hey, you want to go to the movies or you want to have a catch and then they would probably be a little resistant because if they've got a super duper problem, it's like an addiction. It's sort of like you just don't tell a person, oh, stop drinking, and they stop drinking. They have to find that the alternatives are easy enough to get into that they can learn to enjoy them enough.
Right. Yeah.
There are other components in their life that appeal to them. So too often, you see the same problems with drugs and with gaming. A lot of people's idea is, well, let's have a drug lecture. Let's tell people how bad drugs are.
Right. Yeah.
And if somebody's already taking drugs and they're already getting some kind of a reward out of it, they have some reason for doing it, that's not going to make any sense to them.
Right.
And if somebody says something, oh, games, you're stupid for playing games all the time. Don't you see the world's got a lot more to offer or you're never going to amount to anything? Those aren't really making the links that they need to make to get outside of themselves and to spread their horizons more.
Right. Yeah. Huh. Yeah. Okay. We also have like another. Sorry. Another question is let me find it first. So, have you ever played games when you were younger, like arcade games?
Well, there was a time in my life. I don't games. Do you count Pac-Man as a game?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, like
Yes,
arcade,
yeah.
like Donkey Kong.
Stuff
Yeah.
like that. Yeah.
I played a lot of Pac-Man at one point in my life. I would go. I already had children, so I was a father. I was maybe in my, I don't know, 40s, so that might be even really bad. However, I never. I think the game. I think it only costs a quarter. I never played it more than once at a time. So
Uh,
somebody might say, "Well, what's a grown adult with children?" They used to have something called malls. I don't know if they still have them. Going to a game place in a mall and playing Pac-Man, they might think that's like
old.
already unbelievable. On the other hand, if somebody looked at me, they'd say, "Well, can you really be addicted to something if you only put a quarter in and do it one time and then go home?" That's sort of like controlled use.
Mm-hmm.
Sort of like if you take cocaine and somebody said, "Well, you're a cocaine addict," then you say, "Well, I only take it once a month,
Mm-hmm.
like when I'm on vacation or with certain friends, but then I don't get involved with it and it doesn't really have any impact on my life. I'm just using it as a kind of a relaxation." So don't get me wrong, I've got my problems too,
Right.
but I'm not an addicted type person. I mean, I get enough satisfaction out of doing things, sports and politics and
Right. Yeah. Of course.
music and movies, that I'm not too much in danger of getting submerged in something.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. It makes sense. Sorry. One of my other producers also has a question for you. His name is Andrew Landecker.
Hi, nice to meet you.
Good to see you.
Sorry.
Hi.
Hi. See, I wouldn't not really say that like sports and like politics and movies would be like an addiction. I think it's more of like a motivation to go see that.
Well, my point was really, I didn't maybe make it clear enough.
Yeah,
I
I
have
didn't hear you.
real world interests. I count those as real world interests. I mean, you can
Yeah.
be addicted to all of them too. I mean, there are people I live in New York. I mean, there are people who see 20 movies a week. That might be going too far. But if you have interests that tie you to the real world and to other people and to activities that have some health benefit, those are the kind of alternative rewards that prevent you from becoming addicted. Now, you all, I mean, the scariest cases, of course, in terms of gaming addiction, you're aware that the Newtown murderer guy that he was about 19. He spent all day, every day in his house playing like war games.
Wow.
And then there was a guy in Sweden who went to a summer camp, and killed, I think, like 90 kids.
Wow.
Same story with him. They had lost contact with reality. They didn't know if it was night or day. They didn't know if it was reality or what's real and what's not real. To a certain extent, it's not that a war game makes you kill people.
Right.
It's when you lose connection and say, well, that's my reality. And if you ever leave your house,
Mhm.
it's like you see the world as a war game. Those are people that were so disconnected to reality, to any aspect of it, to any relationships with any other people, that they're the extreme of addiction, like somebody who just doesn't stop drinking or shooting up around the clock. They're rare, but
Yeah.
they exist. And when you look at them and think, what the heck is going on, it helps you to understand the whole addiction dynamic.
Okay. Is that?
Yeah, that's all I wanted to say. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay. So we're like
Do you guys have a gaming blog or what? Or just a podcast? What do you do? What is this that we're doing?
It's for like
It's for a documentary that we decided to do about video game addictions and like how companies might be like playing into video game addictions.
So you're exploring the gaming addiction
yeah,
concept and where it's coming from, and
come from
Yeah.
effects.
yeah, you heard a little bit about my interest in that. Well, good. I mean, I know what people would say. Your parents and your teachers would say. Well, you're showing the single thing that's most reassuring about a young person is if they have something that really engages them. That's positive.
Right.
And I don't want to tell you not to do your math homework or your writing assignments or anything, but you sort of only need one thing to really become involved in. Have a decent life, I mean, if you're good at making movies or documentaries, there, you should, try and spread your interest. But that's a life, and that's something that people can respect, and you can respect about yourself. So, I'm always encouraged, and I really encourage people to do what you're doing, to get an interest, to follow it.
Uh-huh.
Now I know we had to learn we had to work out this podcast thing. There's always a lot of technique involved, no matter what you do. But how do you learn to do it? You do it, and now you sort of
Yeah,
know how to use Zoom, and next time it'll be like okay.
Easier. Yeah. Okay, so that makes sense. One of our other question is, what kind of affect early early signs of addiction, kind of
Well, obviously, for example, let's get back to drugs. I know a little bit about them. People say, oh, let's see if your child is taking drugs. And then they'll sneak around the room, or they can take blood tests, or they look in their eyes. But that's not what I look at. I look at how is the person relating to the parents, to school, to activities, to other children and friends. When a person starts dropping off connections to the world, then as you know from what I said before, it doesn't even matter to me 100% whether it's drugs or if it's games. I mean, you can go crazy with games.
Yeah, true.
And so what I'm always tuned into is how the person is hooked into their outside world. What I become worried about is when they start dropping those connections. What I try to encourage parents to do, and to do therapeutically myself, is to make sure they continue to be engaged in these things and to find new interests and to encourage them to make those connections.
Uh-huh. You want to say another question?
No, because you have answered a lot. So really, thank you for doing this. Do you have any other questions, Luke?
Yeah. I was thinking. I had it in my head. While you were talking. I think. Oh yeah. I remember now. What would kind of happen if addiction never kind of existed in this world? Would it have a huge effect? Huge effect on the world.
I didn't know if I totally got that question, but
We'll
we'll never solve addiction. Addiction, since it's involved. I mean, people have this fantasy. Oh, we're going to find. They've been dreaming about this for 50 years at least. We're going to find an inoculation against addiction. We're going to find the addiction button in people's brains, and then we'll take it out, or we'll replace it, or whatever. That'll never happen, because that's not a good description of the addiction process that we've been talking about. Addiction has always existed. Addiction will always exist. It's people's immersion in being engrossed by something that takes over their lives and points it in a negative direction. And of course, right now you hear constantly about the opioid crisis. And often the solutions, to say the least, aren't at all helpful. By our discussion here, you're only going to get people to be less addicted by opioids if they value their own lives and themselves and their options and like more. Let me prove my point.
Yeah.
For the second straight year, the CDC has noted that a certain group of people's lifespan has decreased. In other words, we just take it for granted that people are going to live longer. What the heck? There's more medical advances. We know more about diet, blah, blah, blah. But white people without college educations, their death rate's been increasing. And when people say, well, that's due to drugs, the researchers say, well, not totally. It's drugs, it's alcohol, it's suicide. It's kind of a demoralization. It's kind of a lack of involvement in life. And so there's no cure for those things. How do you cure suicide?
Yeah, true. Yeah,
you already have antidepressant drugs, and they'll do what they do. If you cannot create a sense of community for people, if they cannot have full lives, if they can't, here, I'll give you 4 things people need. They need a purpose.
Right, yeah.
They need a love and relationships. They need well-being. They need like physical and health, well-being.
Right.
So if, for example, if we make it harder for people to get health care, it doesn't matter how much addiction treatment you have if you don't have regular treatment for health.
True.
And lastly, community, some belonging to a larger group of people who care about them. If people wander around on their own, they're kids or adults, they're just more likely to go off the deep end. And so that's what we have to create. And the danger that I talk about often is by looking for some kind of magic bullet solution for addiction, opioid addiction, alcoholism, all addiction, we're losing track of the fundamentals, the common sense things that people need: a full life, a purpose, health, and a community and relationships to live life. That'll never change. That's always true.
True, same. Yeah. Okay. So another.
You guys are making this documentary together, and with that other guy who was in here for a second. It's always good to have some kind of group enterprise and work with other people. You learn a lot, and that's how life works.
Yeah, sense of community.
Parker, want to ask your question?
This is our
Our final other producer.
Oh my God! You gotta. Hello.
Hello, my name's Alex. I wanted to ask you, in your opinion, do you think that there are any positive effects of video game addiction? Because some people say increase.
Well, addiction's never positive. It's a misuse of the term addiction, but obviously there are positive aspects to videos and games. I mean, if you just enjoy yourself and entertain yourself, that's positive. People use videos, obviously, to do training. I mean, develop specific knowledge bases. There's certain skills you can develop through video games. It's not 100% always the most productive way to spend your time because you're sitting on your butt, and you're not dealing with real people. But there are definitely benefits to gain from it, and you can't live in the modern world. Well, what are we doing? We're having a video cast here, a podcast. I'm 72. I'm making some effort to be able to reach into that world because that's the world that you need to deal with. So it's stupid to say, well, we're going to do away with all opioids. You're not going to do that. They're painkillers. It's stupid to say we're going to do away with alcohol. Like some people use alcohol, for christenings and for bar mitzvahs. Alcohol is alcohol. And we're not going to do away with videos or games. That's not going to happen. We're not going to deal with iPhones. The issue is to harness them in some way so that you as an individual and people in general make use of them as part of a larger engagement in life.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, okay. So you mentioned it like about when we were talking about like what's not drug addiction. It's like how people go through the 13 or 12 step process of like
Called the 12-step program, right? Like AA or NA.
that like what do you think why like that process doesn't always work for every person or like most of the people?
Well, I mean, I'm not a big 12-step fan. I'm not as popular as you guys probably like me, but not everybody likes me so well because I point out AA has been in place since it started in 1939, but it's been dominant since like the 50s or 60s, like for 70 years now. And now we're still having what everybody's calling an opioid crisis. So it's sort of obvious that saying to people, here's what we're going to do. We're going to wait till you become addicted. Then we're going to send you to a group of other people who are addicted. Then you're going to say you're powerless and you're going to have to join that group for the rest of your life. That's not my goal. For example, if you had a friend who was in his teens and he was playing too much video games, you wouldn't say, you know what, I'd really like him to say that he's addicted and he's powerless and to go to a video game 12-step group for the rest of your life. That doesn't sound like a very
Helpful
creative solution. Say the guy's 15 and he lives to be 85, 70 more years going every week to a video game addiction. What you really hope is that he's going to emerge,
different.
grab onto life, go to college, get married, have a life and develop some positive involvements.
Yeah, that makes sense.
You guys are my biggest fans. I'm gonna use this documentary as my signing in piece, as my marketing tool. Can you send me this interview when we're done? Are you gonna have it captured in any form?
Yeah. We could send you the whole documentary.
I know. I can't wait to see that. But can you possibly capture this clip and send it to me when we're done?
I think so. I could just send you an email or.
I knew I should have answered that guy's question. Yeah. Then I'll send it around and we'll all become famous, okay?
All right.
Yeah.
Sounds good.
All right, guys. This has been a lot of fun. Thanks so much for looking me up and making this all happen. And and I do send me the documentary comes out. I'll spread it around.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you for
Bye now.
Bye. Bye. Okay.
That didn't go well at first, but it got better.
I got that. It became more. So that's about approximately like 20 minutes.
We have to set up another meeting that we have.
Yeah, I can't.
Could you do the Thursday then?
I could probably do it.
Yeah, I don't know why. What?